Thank you very much, Karen, for taking the meeting, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Bob. I am an alcoholic. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. My sober date is January 2nd, 1990. And it is a privilege and an honor to be able to be here tonight to speak to you. I was at my niece's wedding about 10 days ago or so, and I remember thinking, this is the last time I'll put a tie on for this whole year, forgetting that I would wear one tonight. And why wouldn't I? I mean, this is important stuff that we do here. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're wondering if you belong here, if you think that you might have a problem with alcohol or some permutation of checking this thing out or maybe coming back after a little hiatus, I just want to encourage you to stick around and to do the steps and to get a sponsor and read the books and do the stuff that we do, go to meetings. And I can say that because it's worked for me. And I'll tell you my story, and you'll see. I was my buddy Andy was talking the other day, and he used the word transformation. And I have had a transformation. My life is totally different than it was when I got here. Couple of things first. I just want to say a big shout out to Stephen for the daily ponderables and for this meeting. And I'm sure I don't even have the foggiest idea of all the other service work that he does for AA, but I know a lot of people here in Jacksonville read the daily ponderables every day. I've had probably 10 people have referred me to it. You should get the daily ponderables, and I've ever since I started reading it, it's a mainstay for my sobriety. And thanks to all my friends that are here. You know, a lot of these people have heard my story, but they still show up to support me, and I really appreciate that, and it means so much to have that kind of support. So thank you. When I speak, I usually start with a joke and kind of warm up the crowd a little bit. Maybe somebody was sent here by the judge or an angry spouse, so we'll warm the crowd up a little bit. So there was the show Cheers. Was probably, I don't know, 30 years ago or so, and Cliff Clavin and Norm were the two barflies that were always sitting at the corner of the bar. And I know some of you have heard this story, so I apologize. But Cliff is talking to Norm, and he says, well, you see, Norm, it's like this. A herd of buffalo can only move as fast as the slowest buffalo. And when the herd is hunted, it's the slowest and the weakest ones at the back of the herd that get killed first. This natural selection is good for the herd as a whole, because the general speed and health of the whole group keeps improving by the regular killing of its weakest members. In much the same way, the human brain can only operate as fast as the slowest brain cells. Now, as we know, excessive intake of alcohol kills brain cells, but naturally it attacks the slowest and the weakest brain cells first. In this way, regular consumption of beer eliminates the weaker brain cells, making the brain a faster and more efficient machine. And that, Norm, is why you always feel smarter after a few beers. And I always felt smarter after a few beers. I'll tell you a story about what happened to me today. You know, I love being an Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I first heard people saying that, I didn't understand it. I've been with my wife since 2005. And we've had 3 disagreements in our 18 years together. And one of them was yesterday. And I woke up this morning with my alcoholic brain telling me all of the very wise things that I could say to prove to my wife that I was right and she was wrong. Now I'm on a 7 a.m. Zoom meeting every day. And one of the things that we do on that Zoom meeting is there's 60 people on it every day, maybe more. And we pick at random, we pick a person to pick a reading from the big book or the 12 and 12 at random. This is the reading that we had today. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were arranging life to suit ourselves. It works. It really does. Now, I would have thought that was a coincidence for many, many years. I would have thought that was a coincidence, but one of the promises is that we have entered the realm of the spirit. And I have entered the realm of the spirit, and I know that that was my higher power talking to me about how I could be a better person today. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. It's replaced all the old got to get ahead and don't care about other people and all that stuff that was so much a part of my alcoholism, to where today most of the time I'm a pretty decent human being, and I actually think about other people and I'm able to do the right thing. So I'll start. When I tell my story, I really don't know where it's going to go, but I always start with a couple of stories. The first one is 3 months before I was born, my mother's father was put in jail for almost beating her to death, actually. He almost beat her to death in a drunken rage. And that's the guy who raised my mom. And alcoholism runs in my family. When I was about 3, we lived a couple of doors away from my grandmother. I used to go over there for second breakfast. My older siblings were in school, and I'd go to grandma's. And one day, my grandfather gave me some money. I think it was probably a $5 bill. It was 1955. It was a lot of money. I mean, it was an amazing amount of money. I remember this like it was yesterday. A couple of minutes later, there was a railroad flat. So like there was one room, another room, another room, another room. You had to go through all the rooms to get to the last one. He was way back in the last room. A couple of minutes later, he says, "That kid stole my money." Now, my grandmother picked me up and we ran down the stairs and out the door. And we ran down 89th Street in Woodhaven as fast and as far as we could go until my grandmother was probably ready to fall over. Now, I can tell you right now, that was a long time ago. I know the fear that I felt at that point in my life, 3 years old, and I knew that grandma was really, really, really scared. And alcoholism has affected me my entire life. I always thought that it was everybody else's problem. When I got to be about 16, I went out with a couple of buddies. We bought a case of beer, and we went to down the back of this abandoned building. And I studied math, so I know that if you have 3 guys and 24 cans of beer, Joe drinks 6, Dino drinks 6, and Bob drinks 12. And that's what I did the first night I drank. Now, years later, when I got to AA, somebody said, if you outdrink your peer group, you're probably alcoholic. And here I am the first night, I drank twice as much as my buddies. And the 2 of them got drunk, and I didn't. The next week we were back there, we did the same thing, same result. Well, the 3rd week, Joe and Dino were very concerned about me not getting drunk, so they bought a pint of Southern Comfort. And I drank that, and then the magic happened. And that night I got sick, I blacked out. I snuck back in my house. Up in New York, they don't have them in Florida, but in New York, they have basements. And my bedroom was down the basement. I went in the side door, snuck down the stairs, and I made believe I was asleep when my mother came down to smell my breath, because she knew what was going on. And I knew she knew what was going on. And the next morning I woke up with fear, such a sense of disappointment. I knew I had done something really wrong. And now, knowing my mother's history with alcoholism probably scared the life out of her, and nothing was said about it. And that was the beginning of my drinking. And I probably could have come to AA the next day. You black out, you have regret, remorse, you hurt the people you love. And I had the full Monty the first day, but I drank for 20 more years. And I'll talk about it. I'll mention drugs. I was in an AA meeting, but drugs are part of my story. I was a child of the 60s, and it was cool to smoke pot. If you were drinking, you were a derelict. If you smoked pot at 7 in the morning, no, that was cool. So I smoked pot at 7 in the morning for 10 years every day. I used to have a job in the dining hall. They'd call me, and I was on like the the call list. And if somebody didn't show up, it'd be 6:15 in the morning, the dining hall manager would call me in college, and I'd wake up, answer the phone, take a couple of hits on a joint, and go work in the kitchen at the dining hall. I was 19 years old, 20 years old, already in the grips of alcoholism. And it didn't get much better. You know, along the way, I graduated with a 2.4 average. I went to college with a full scholarship and graduated with a 2.4 average. And I changed my major several times to get into something that was the least demanding thing that was available. And always, you know, just living, you know, it says in the book about being under the heap or on the top of the heap. And I was under the heap. Managed to graduate, left New York, moved up to New Hampshire, lived there for 10 years. Very troubled marriage. Moved to Jackson, in 75, I moved to New Hampshire. In 85, I moved to Rhode Island. And when I moved to Rhode Island, I thought, I better quit doing the drugs. The drugs are killing me. I'm going to quit doing the drugs. And 5 years later, I actually had a plan on killing myself. So I don't introduce myself as an alcoholic and a drug addict. The alcohol was first and the alcohol was last. And after 5 years of just drinking, I was literally suicidal. And my life was in the dumper. I had lost a job. My marriage was on the rocks. I had no relationship with my two children. And I had started going to counseling around 1982 or 83 after my daughter was born. I knew that I was not the dad that I wanted to be. So I started looking for answers, you know, and in retrospect, the counselors mentioned alcohol like all the time. And I could never put the dots together. You know, they're waiting for me to say, maybe I have a problem with alcohol. And all the time I'm thinking, well, my father has a problem with alcohol. And if you had him as a dad, you'd be like me. Your life would be in the dumper too. And I started going to adult children of alcoholics, and I love Al-Anon. Believe me, I love Al-Anon, but it did not help my alcohol problem. And I was at an Al-Anon meeting one night, and I think I heard them say this. It sounds so crazy to say it, but I think this is what I heard. It was, you can become just like an alcoholic without ever having taken the first drink. Now, I don't know if that's what they said, but that's what I heard. And I thought, well, maybe I'm like an alcoholic, even though I haven't taken the first drink. Now, at this point, I've drank enough to float an aircraft carrier. But in that moment, in that night, in that Al-Anon meeting, I thought maybe I should go to AA. And I knew two things about AA. One was I didn't want to belong here. And the other one was there was an AA meeting in my church. I would go to mass on Sunday mornings. I'm a recovering Catholic as well as many other things. Sunday morning, they have a bulletin and they would read all the things that are going on. Wednesday night, 8 p.m., School Street Survivors, parentheses, AA, parentheses. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the School Street Survivors. So I walked in there the first night. A woman is telling her story and she's telling my story. I could not believe that you could talk about these things to a room full of people. I mean, the things that I was most ashamed of, the self-loathing, the hatred, the terrible shape my life was in. And this woman got up, and I'll tell you what she said, and it's kind of rough, but I'm going to say it anyway, because this is where I was in December of 1989. She said, I always thought I was a scumbag. And I thought, oh my God, I always thought I was one of those too. But it blew my mind that you could talk about that. I mean, that was my secret. Like, my best friends didn't know what I thought about myself. I put a smile on my face and made everybody believe that life was great for Bob Kogan. And here's this woman talking about this stuff. And at the end of the meeting, I'm watching her, and she walks out of the meeting with two other women, and they're laughing. I'm in. I am in AA, because I don't know what's going on here, but it is something magical happening in here. That woman can go from where I am today to laughing. There was no laughter in my life, and I had given up hope that there ever would be. I wanted out, and she changed. I wish I knew who she was, because that woman saved my life, without a doubt. I said, I'm coming back next week. So I think it was the third week I was there. Kerry Donovan comes up to me, and I owe my life to Kerry Donovan too, and Cliff Raymond and Teddy Addison and John McGuire, and there's so many, Jack McDonough, there are so many that I owe my life to. But Kerry Donovan was, we were, me and Cliff and Teddy all have the same sobriety date. We all got sober in January of 1990. And we always thought that Kerry had to be the president of AA because like he made all the decisions. Like one night, the commitment group didn't show up, and Kerry said, "We're going to have a pickup meeting." But this guy's got to be the president, right? I mean, he's the smartest guy in the room. So he says, he comes up to me and he says, "Your name's Bob, isn't it?" I tell you, I could cry right now that this guy remembered my name. I was the kind of guy I would go out to dinner with you on Saturday night, and we'd sit around a table for 2 hours, 3 or 4 couples. And if I ran into you on Monday, I would say to you, "You probably don't remember me. My name is Bob." That's what I thought of myself. And here, this guy, I don't even know how he learned my name, but he remembered it. And again, I'm in, right? I mean, this is incredible. This guy knows who I am. I really thought I was like the invisible guy. And then Kerry pulls, and I always refer to this as the first Jedi mind trick that was pulled on me in AA. After Kerry remembers my name, he does this. He goes, Bob, this group needs a greeter. And he says, "But you got to be here every week. This is an important job. You got to get here early. You stand at the bottom of those stairs, and when anybody walks in, you say, 'Welcome to the School Street Survivors.' You can't miss, and you can't be late." And I tell you, he hoodwinked me on that one. But being a greeter gave me a sense of purpose. I was like I was doing something that meant something to somebody else other than me, and I wasn't getting a bag of weed for it or money. It was the first thing I had done in a long time that had dignity and honor, and there was nothing in it for me. And after a couple of months, I was graduated to the coffee maker, and I set up the chairs. This is great stuff. I mean, I am on my way, right? I love being in AA. I really did. They up north, they had commitment groups, so we would have 3 or 4 of us, 5 or 6 of us would go to another group on another night. Our group met on Wednesdays. So Wednesday night, another group would come in, and then some other night, we'd all go out. So we were driving, obviously, Kerry's driving. I mean, he's the president of AA, so he's driving. So Cliff and Ted and I are in the back seat, the three knuckleheads, and we'd go down to Westerly, or we'd go up to Massachusetts, Seekonk, somewhere close by, Attleboro, Cranston, Providence. We went to all the meetings around. We got to know all the folks in AA, and sitting in the back of that car and going to a meeting, and then sitting in the back of that car on the way home, there was peace. There was peace. The voices in the head were gone, and I had a sense that I was going to be okay. And the old timers all said that. They said, "You're going to be okay." And I didn't know how I was going to be okay. I didn't really think that they understood how bad my life was. But they kept saying to me, "You're going to be okay." And I believed them. Okay. So 1990, about 3 weeks, I started there in December of '89. I'll tell you my first step story. So every week they would say, get a group, join a group, get a sponsor, and show up to the commitments. They would list off all the things, and then they would say, join a group. The School Street Survivors is a really good group. Everybody in School Street, raise your hand. They'd all raise their hand. They go, "If you want to join the group, go see Chris." So I started going there around maybe the beginning of December '89. And around maybe the third or fourth week of January, I'm going to join the group. I'm starting to get involved here. I'm going to join the group. So I go see Chris, and she was the group secretary / assassin. And she said to me, "When's the last time you were drunk?" And I said, "I don't know, probably 2, 3 months ago." I said, "I've been so depressed. The drink ain't working anymore." It was probably 2, 3 months ago. And she thought I was being evasive, intentionally evasive. Imagine that. And she said, "When'd you have your last drink?" And she yelled at me just like that, screamed at me. Now, at this point in time, I don't have a job. I don't have any relationship with my children or my wife. I have a plan on killing myself, but I've still got pride. And she is not talking to me like that. And my dander rose up, and I could just think about maybe just giving her one good smack across the side of the face. And there was a couple of moments of silence in that room. And I actually literally heard a voice in my right ear. And the voice said, "Have you had your last drink?" Now, Chris was asking about the most recent drink because she wanted to write something down on a piece of paper. And God was asking about the final drink. And in that church basement, it was like, the jig is up, man. It's time to fish or cut bait, you know. And I heard God say to me, "Have you had your last drink? Are you done? Are you done? Or do you want to keep going?" And my first moment of humility, really. And I said, I had a sip of champagne when the ball came down on New Year's Eve. I said I was the designated driver that night, but I had a sip of champagne. And Chris writes January 2nd, 1990 on this piece of paper. And she taps the thing like this. She says, January 2nd, 1990. That's your date. That's your date. And up in Rhode Island, they have a term, spacone. And they have another term, stunad. Spacone is a wise guy that doesn't know what he's doing. And stunad means you're just really stupid. And I was both of those things that night because I'm thinking, big deal. January 2nd, 1990. Who cares? I had no idea what a sobriety date meant. I had no idea what that meant. And I am so grateful that it's still my sobriety date. About 3 or 4 months later, I had a thought one day about having a drink. And I remembered Chris, and I said, you got a date, it's written down somewhere. Why don't you just keep that date? And the thought passed. And you and I both know that if I had had a drink that night, I might be dead today. And I'm no poster child for AA. I didn't jump right into the steps. I wasn't supremely happy about doing a 4-step inventory and sharing it with somebody and doing the amends. And I looked at the steps for a long time, and I often say the steps fit into 3 categories. There were the ones I had already done, the ones I didn't need to do, and the ones I was never going to do. And try that out for a couple of years, and you'd be pretty miserable in AA, and you're not drinking. And that's what happened to me. I was pretty miserable in AA, and I wasn't drinking. And my buddy Cliff said, he said, "Hey, he says, I'm going to this step meeting on Monday night up in Warwick. Why don't you join me?" And it was a room of real heavy hitters, all guys with 30, 40 years sobriety. And we would read every person, we'd go around the room. You read one paragraph out of that 12 and 12, and you'd spoke on it. And then the second person would read and speak. And when it was 8 o'clock to 9:30, boom, 9:30. Okay, we're done for the week. And these guys were actually talking about like having done an inventory. Like they actually did the steps, and they spoke about them with expertise. Really, you could tell that they weren't kidding around. These dudes was the real deal. And we went around that room every 3 months. We'd hit the step, and the 4th step was the one that was that was the one that was killing me. I wasn't going to do that because I peaked and I knew 5 was next. And after 3 or 4 times around the room and me saying, I never done a 4th, haven't done a 4th, haven't. One night I just got sick of hearing myself say that, and I said, I guess it's time to do a 4th step. And sadly for me, my sponsor was in the room. So he jumped on me, man. The next day he was in my office, and we're going out to lunch. And he had me, he got me through that. And as soon as that was over, bang, who's going to do the 5th? Gary Parker. We're going to do the 5th with Gary Parker. Now, Gary Parker was a guy who, when Gary introduced himself at a meeting, he would say, I have alcoholism, and I'm very grateful for the gift. Now, the first time I heard Gary say that, I thought, I just met my first wet brain. I had heard about people that were so shot out that their brains didn't work anymore. And when he said he was grateful for the gift of alcoholism, I thought, this dude is toast. But I did my 5th step with Gary on Good Friday Eve, probably 1994. And this dude, I'm serious when I tell you, he had 200 candles lit in his living room. And I walked in there and we talked for like 6 hours that night. And I walked out of there. My life has never been the same. I dumped it all. I dumped all the garbage, all the self-loathing, the hatred, all the mistakes, all the lies, the cheating, the times I let down the people in my family. I got rid of it all that night. I'm telling you, I felt like I weighed about 7 pounds walking back to my car. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I literally felt like I was floating. And I'm just so grateful for the 12 steps. You know, we read them at the meeting. If you're somebody sitting here and you're not sure you want to do the steps, or you don't think they make sense, or and they don't make sense, guess why? Because it's not about your brain, it's about your spirit. And that fourth and fifth step changed my life. And I'll tell you my seventh step story. It was years later. I was living in Jacksonville, and I was by myself now that we had the divorce. The wife was gone. All the nice toys were gone. I came to Jacksonville with $1,000 in my pocket, and the beat up furniture that the cat tore up, and my records and my books, and my freedom. And God had me right where He wanted me, because there was no more of this make yourself look good for the whole world to see. I was working for $44,000 a year, running a woodworking store, and I was living in a place. My sister is on this meeting. She affectionately called my home the tomb. It was a man cave in every sense of the word, with like one chair, a bookshelf, a TV. I mean, I had nothing, but I had me, and God had me. And I used to go out. I'd come home from work, and the dog was there, and I would go take the dog out for a walk, and we'd walk to the mailbox, and I would realize that I left my keys on the countertop, and I would go off on myself saying, "You are a loser. You are an effing piece of garbage." I mean, just horrendous self-talk. It's just terrible. All that stuff that I had heard the first night in AA, I still had that. And one day, the thought occurred to me that you probably shouldn't talk to yourself like that. Now that's the God moment. When you get the God moment, you got to stay with it, because that doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't happen for everybody. But that was my God moment. I said, you probably shouldn't talk to yourself like that. And then the next day, it was probably the same, maybe a little less. The third day, a little less. The fourth day, a little less. And I don't know if it took a week, 6 weeks, or 6 months. But the day came where I walked out there. I got to the mailbox, and I said, "Wow, you're really forgetful." And I have not spoken to myself like that since. That's 20 years ago. And I have not talked to myself. God took that away from me that day. I had a vision when I was living in that little crappy little house up there on Fort Caroline Road. I had a vision of me. I was 54 years old, and I had a vision of me being 74. I think in pictures. And I had a vision of me being 74, and I was living above a butcher shop in this little, crappy little apartment, where they used to be a window, and they cut a door in, and they have an outside staircase. I mean, the most basic. I'm wearing a secondhand field jacket that I got at an Army Navy store, and it's me and the dog. And I had nothing in my life. In the material world, I had nothing. But I knew right then that I was perfectly okay. There hadn't been a woman in my life in those 20 years. It was me and God and the dog. And I was okay. And that's the first time in my life that I was okay. And I didn't need all that stuff. And I'm still okay. And how that happens, I can't tell you how it happens, but I know it does happen. And it happens in the 12 steps. And it happens by you looking at my character defects. There's a line in our book that says that, no, it was Chuck C. who says that all problems come down to one problem: conscious separation from God. And that was my character defects. It had separated me from God and from everybody else. And I was all alone. I was this guy that nobody knew, these top secret things that were going on about me, how much I hated myself and all the bad things I had done. And even after doing a really decent fifth step, I still had those thoughts that you're really just underneath it all, you're still just a piece of garbage. And that was removed from me in that period of time when I was living up on in that little zero lot line home up on Fort Caroline Road. And since I've come to Jacksonville, I'll tell you, when I left Rhode Island, Cliff made a copy of the When and Where for me, which one day in the When and Where down here has like probably 100 meetings in it, maybe 70, I don't know. But there's an unbelievable amount of AA in Jacksonville, and it's really, really good AA. So when I'm coming down here, Cliff gives me a copy of the one page of the When and Where, and he says, there's no reason for you to not stay involved when you go to Jacksonville. And then Teddy used to come down here on vacation. So this was August of 2003 when I moved to Jacksonville. And Teddy says, I'm coming to Jacksonville in November. And if you can't take me to meetings all over that city and introduce me on a first name basis, I'm going to kick your ass. You get the love and you get the, and those two guys are just like that. Teddy will tell it like it is. And Cliff is just more of the softer, easier, softer way. But those two guys love me enough to tell me the truth, And I got to Jacksonville on a Friday night. It was too late to go to a meeting. I called the intergroup office on Saturday morning, and they sent me to a meeting at the San Marco Club. And I walk in there, and a guy gets up to read how it works. And he says, my name is Cliff, and I'm an alcoholic. Now, I don't know how many guys you know that are named Cliff. I knew one guy named Cliff, and he was my best AA buddy. And my first meeting in Jacksonville, I meet another guy named Cliff. And that's on Saturday night. Monday night, I walk in on Bay Meadows Road. I walk into the Catholic Church over there. And a guy sticks his hand out and he says, my name is Ted Tillinghast, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to tell you, I literally turned around because I thought God was standing right behind me. I meet Cliff and I meet Ted, the two guys that were the hardest people to say goodbye to in Rhode Island. And the first two meetings I go to, well, it was actually the third meeting. I went to another meeting on Sunday, but in the first 3 days I'm in Jacksonville, I meet a new Cliff and a new Ted. I tell you, I knew I was touched right then. It was, they had told me, the people I came down here to work for, they said, we'll put your stuff in a storage unit and you can come back to Rhode Island if you want to. And I said, no, I'm not going to Jacksonville with that thought in my mind. If I'm going to Jacksonville, I'm going with the belief that I belong there and that's the right place for me, and I'm going to make it work. And I want to tell you, since I've come to Jacksonville, realistically, I have 300 friends in AA, and a lot of them are on this meeting. And people that know me, that love me, that care about me, that I'm in communication with them all the time. I don't count it because I don't need to know. God sends them, but I sponsor a bunch of guys. I was doing a fifth step with a guy yesterday. I mean, my life is blessed and full. And this is a guy who really just wanted out. I wanted it over. And hopelessness is when there's no belief that it's going to get better. And that was me. Today is bad, tomorrow's worse, and the day after is going to be worse than that. And it's never going to get better. I believe that to the chill of my bone. And these guys who said, Bob, you're going to be okay. I heard the music and I believed it. And I did what they told me to do to the best of my ability. And nobody does this perfectly. But I tell you, I've thrown myself into Alcoholics Anonymous. I read the books. I speak as much as I can. I called Stephen, and it's like, my thought is this. The creator of the universe has touched my life. There's no question in my mind. You call him God, spirit, creative intelligence, whatever your name for that the creator is. I've been touched. I know that the hand of God came down and touched me in a way that is indescribable, really. And it happened in the 12 steps. It happened, first of all, when I got the willingness to do the work. That was I think the first thing was really the time when I remember saying to myself, after 20 years of drinking and making excuses and everything's bad and it's getting worse, there was a day where I realized, I said, you're in real serious trouble here. You are not going to come up with some great idea that's going to solve this problem. You need help. You're in way over your head and you're not going to figure it out. And maybe these guys and women in AA have something that is going to help you. And I heard the laughter in the rooms. I remember there was a woman left in that meeting room up in Rhode Island one night, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God, somebody's laughing somewhere." I mean, it was the sound of laughter was foreign to me. It just struck me that somebody was laughing, and to go from where I was in those days to where I am today is really unbelievable. Um, I can't believe I've run out of, I'm almost out of time here. I mean, I'm almost out of words. Usually I'm like the Irish mayor. I'll talk for 6 hours on a 50-minute meeting, but I guess I'm just feeling I'm just feeling the incentive to maybe just open it up to anybody else. If there's somebody here that's struggling or that's thinking that this thing is not for them, or that maybe, there's all these crazy guys like me who love AA, but that's never going to happen for you. I was like that for years. Really, I'm serious. Even when I came to Jacksonville, I was 13 years sober, and I was still hanging on to that thought that, yeah, yeah, this is great. You guys are all happy-go-lucky and joyous and free and all of that stuff, but I'm never going to be that guy. I'm gonna have a great life, and I'm not going to drink. I'm going to have friends and all of this. But I want to tell you, the life I have today is really, literally second to none. That happy, joyous, and free thing has happened for me. I'm a person of integrity today. I respect myself. I respect other people. I know I bring value into the world. And the opportunity to speak here tonight, I called Stephen, and my thought was, who am I to not share this gift? One of the great philosophers said, you don't light a light and put it under a bushel basket. You shine it for the world to see. And I just appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. And I really, really appreciate all of you for being here. And I love being sober. My friend Tom M says, I love being sober. And I love being sober. And I'm not going to drink the rest of today. And I promise you, I'm not going to drink tomorrow either. And thank you all for being here and for allowing me the privilege of doing this. Thank you.